is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I am wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I am doing a book haul. I've been doing book hauls less and less frequently on this channel, and so when I do them, they cover like a larger and larger span of time. My last book haul that I posted was for June through October of 2023, and so this one is for November 2023 through May 2024. That's 7 months of book buying over a period of time during which I've gradually gotten a bit better at actually reading new books as I buy them. I think I counted 26 books total here, of which I have maybe already read 15. In addition, when I was putting together these stacks of books, I discovered 3 books that should have been in that last book haul because I did acquire them. They were all pre-orders that arrived in that June through October of 2023 window that for some reason or other I missed when I was putting that book haul together, so I'm going to give those 3 a shout out first. One of the things I've been doing in the last year or so is pre-ordering more books, but also committing to reading my pre-orders as soon as they arrive. Like, that's my threshold for books that I choose to pre-order these days is this a book that I want to drop everything to read the moment it comes out? So the first of the 3 pre-orders that I missed in that June through October book haul was one that actually came out in the month of May, but I didn't get my copy in the mail until early June. I read it immediately, and so this is a book that I read a full year ago now, and it is Witch King by Martha Wells. This is one of this year's Hugo nominees, so you'll hear me talk about this more when I discuss this year's best novel shortlist in whatever capacity I end up doing that. I gave this 4 stars. I had another pre-order in June of last year that was Mortal Follies by Alexis. I ended up giving this 3 stars. There were some things I absolutely loved about this, and then some things that I found very frustrating. And then my pre-order from August of 2023 was Thornhedge by Kingfisher. This is a novella also on the Hugo shortlist this year. It's a fairy tale novella with a changeling twist on Sleeping Beauty, and I gave it 4 stars. My next stack of books is all of my pre-orders since then, all of which I have read, none of which I have wrapped up yet. Firstly, System Collapse by Martha Wells, the most recent Murderbot novel, 4 stars. Next, All the Hidden Paths by Meadows. This is the sequel to A Strange and Stubborn Endurance. This is a political romantic fantasy series following the relationship between 2 men who have an arranged marriage in book 1. I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was on par with the first book in terms of its quality. And then this one was barely a pre-order because when I finished All the Hidden Paths, I realized that Meadows had another book that was coming out very soon. And so I pre-ordered this like a week before it released. But that is Finding Echoes, which is a novella from Neon Hemlock Press. They are a small queer SFF publisher that puts out some great novellas. This is completely unrelated to A Strange and Stubborn Endurance and All the Hidden Paths. I don't know if it will eventually get sequels, but it works as a standalone. I also gave this 4 stars, and since this was an early 2024 release, this is one that I will be hyping up when Hugo nominations come around next year, because I am always trying to shout out books that are not from Tor.com for the novella category. Next is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. The first book in this series, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, was a 5-star read for me. I have that review on my channel. This wasn't quite as good for me. I gave it 4 stars. It's still a lot of fun. Still will pre-order the 3rd book. And then my most recent pre-order, Dragonfruit by Makiia Lucier. This is a standalone Pacific Islands inspired YA fantasy. I had previously read Year of the Reaper from this author and thought it was really strong. This I was not quite as impressed by, but still a strong 3 stars. I have a bunch more new books that I read in this period of time, a bunch of which I have already read, but not all of them. And then lastly, I'm going to get to this stack of used books that I have bought. I have read none of the used books. Honestly, when I go used bookstore shopping, I pick up all sorts of things, and they're not necessarily like my highest priority reads. They go on the TBR shelves for later, but I am often happy that I have them later. Anyways, 5 of the books that I bought new are self-published titles that I was just that sure I was gonna like enough to want to have print copies of. And in all of these cases, I was right. The first three are this entire trilogy, the Tinkered Starsong trilogy by Gail Carriger. The first book is Divinity 36. The second is Demigod 12, and the third is Dome 6. These are sci-fi. I have a full review of this trilogy on my channel. It is one of 3 series I reviewed earlier this month in an epic over an hour-long video, but there are timestamps. I will link that so you can watch it if you haven't yet. My ratings for these were 5 stars, 5 stars, and 4 stars. And then the other 2 self-published books that I bought and read immediately upon receiving them were the first 2 books in the Greenwing and Dart series by Victoria Goddard. These are Stargazy Pie and Bee Sting Cake. These are a zany, whimsical Fantasy of Manners series set in the same universe as a bunch of this author's other books, but this universe is a little bit more like a multiverse where there are a bunch of different worlds that used to be magically connected. At this point in the chronology, those connections have broken apart and you can't travel between those worlds anymore, and I think a bunch of her other books take place in one of the other worlds. Anyways, I haven't seen any reason you can't read this series on its own, and because it's Fantasy of Manners, I really wanted to. Stargazy Pie is an extremely chaotic book. I knew that from the reviews going in, and I knew that the series gets better after this. This was a very strong 3 stars for me. And then book 2, Bee Sting Cake, was 4 stars. Moving on from the self-published titles to the traditionally published titles, I have 2 novellas from Solaris's Satellites novella line that I wanted to read for Hugo nominations this year. I did end up nominating them both, but neither of them ended up on the shortlist. They are A Theory of Haunting by Sarah Monette and The Iron Children by Rebecca Fraimow. Sarah Monette is the same author who also writes as Catherine Addison. A Theory of Haunting follows a character of hers named Kyle Murchison Booth, who she's written a bunch of stories about previously under the Monette name. This novella works as a standalone. You don't have to have read any of the other stories first, although I could tell there was some absent backstory about the character. This is a spooky, spooky haunted house story. And then I would probably call The Iron Children science fantasy. It's a little hard to tell whether what's going on here is supposed to be tech or magic, but it's about a character who is training to learn to lead an army of augmented soldiers when things go wrong. I gave both of these books 4 stars. Next is a book that was a total impulse purchase for me that totally paid off. This is A Warning About Swans by R.M. Romero, a YA fantasy novel in verse that I threw in my Barnes & Noble cart when I was shopping online because it was 50% off. I ended up giving this 5 stars. I have a full written review of this book on Goodreads. I haven't done a filmed version of that review for YouTube yet, so I'll link you the Goodreads version. Next is A Power Unbound by Freya Marske. This is the 3rd and final book in the Last Binding trilogy, which are historical fantasy romances. This is another series that I reviewed in that hour-plus long video, so link for that as well. You can hear all of my thoughts there. 4 stars for this. And then finally, The Saint of Bright Doors by Vajra Chandrasekera. This is another one, along with Witch King, that's on this year's Best Novel Hugo list, so I will talk about those together at some point. I actually bought this like very shortly before the Hugo shortlist was announced, and then when that shortlist came out and this was on it, I started reading this immediately. 4 stars, incredibly interesting debut fantasy novel. And then I was about to say that I only have 2 new books that I acquired in this window of time that I haven't read yet, except I remembered there's a 3rd one. It's in my bedroom. I think this brings my total count up to 27 books. I'm gonna have to go get it. The 3rd one that I just grabbed is another self-published title. This is Tadek and the Princess by Alexandra Rowland. This is a companion novella to A Taste of Gold and Iron that I'm honestly surprised that Tor.com didn't acquire, given that they're the publisher of the novel. Anyways, it's obviously about the character Tadek who appears in that book. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I'm just going with it. And I think this has like a present day timeline that takes place after the events of A Taste of Gold and Iron, and then flashbacks to events that happened before. And then I have one book that was given to me as a birthday gift from a friend. This is The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This is the first in a fantasy series with some Middle Eastern folklore influences. I think the second book is coming out maybe later this year. I am a little bit nervous to read this because the friend who gave this to me knows this author, and like knowing that I have mutual acquaintances with this author makes me scared about what if I don't like it. To be clear, I have never met Chelsea Abdullah. I don't think she knows I exist. But because we have mutual friends, I still feel like it's going to be awkward if I don't like her book. And then the last new book I bought is actually a bind-up of 2 books. This is the Book of Illyrian by Martha Wells. This is the reissue of The Element of Fire, which I believe was her debut novel, and The Death of the Necromancer. These are 2 of her early novels that take place in a shared world, but I think are both standalones. This edition is updated and revised. I will say though, like, I'm a little disappointed in the physical quality of the paperback. It is so soft and floppy, and I'm worried that like the cover is gonna get damaged really easily, because when I went to buy this in the bookstore, they had 3 copies, and 2 of the 3 were already like badly damaged just from wear on the store shelves. I feel like a book of these dimensions that's this floppy needed to have like a thicker, sturdier cardstock for the cover. Does anyone else who's like handled this book in person feel that way? But of the older books of hers that Tor.com has been releasing, this is the one of hers I most wanted to buy for 2 reasons. The first is that The Death of the Necromancer is probably the Martha Wells book that's been on my radar the longest. Like, it's probably the only book of hers I knew existed before Murderbot. And I've just been curious about this book for a very, very long time, and I've never seen like a print copy of it anywhere. So specifically, The Death of the Necromancer was the book in this that I was eager to buy, but I will obviously read both of them. And then the second reason is that I already own a used copy of The Wizard Hunters, which is the first book in the series that takes place in this same world. I think you can start this series without reading the other 2 books first, but I think they take place after, which is a nice segue into the first of my used books, which is The Ships of the Air, which is the second book in this trilogy, matching edition. The series is called The Fall of Illyrian. Maybe it's pronounced Illyrian? I don't know. I think this is a trilogy, so there's just one of these I'm still missing, and yes, this copy has some cover damage, and no, I don't particularly care on used books. I should say all of the used books I have here, except one, come from used bookstores in the Seattle area. I was there over the holidays to visit with family, and I bought a bunch of books. So The Ships of the Air was the first one of those. Next, I have one more mass market paperback. This is Diplomatic Immunity by Lois McMaster Bujold, one of the Vorkosigan novels that I didn't have yet. I think there's another Vorkosigan at the bottom of the stack here. Yes, so Cryo Burn is the other Vorkosigan book that I found. I'm getting so close to having a full set of these books. So close. I need to like get my act together and figure out which exactly are the ones I'm missing at this point, because I'm at the point where I will not know if I'm in a used bookstore whether any of the ones they have are ones that I am still missing unless I have a list. Next is another science fiction book. This one's been on my TBR a long time. I don't remember who recommended it to me or why, but this is Unconquerable Sun by Kate Elliott. Kate Elliott is an author who keeps getting recommended to me by everyone. I keep buying her books. I keep not reading them, so I now have about 1 million places I could start with Kate Elliott. I have no idea when I'm ever going to actually read something by her, but it's gonna happen eventually. I have so many of them. I think everything else of hers that I own is fantasy, though. Next, I have a book that I'm kind of honestly surprised I didn't own already, but that is The Demon King by Cinda Williams Chima. This is the first book in a series with, I think, multiple spin-off series that were YA fantasy published in like, this was 2009, so like through the 2010s after that. I kind of always wanted to read these, and I kind of always thought I would find the first book in a bookstore somewhere, but I kept finding only books that were not the first book. I finally found the first book, you know, over a decade late. I think people think that this series is like still good and that it holds up and is still worth reading. And I get like a kind of nostalgia craving for YA from this era, so I am glad to finally own this. A more recent middle grade novel that I found a copy of was Ikenga by Nnedi Okorafor. This came out in 2020. And then my last book in this haul is my last used book that I did not buy on that trip to Seattle. I actually bought this just like a couple weeks ago. And this is After the Dragons by Cynthia Zhang. This is a small press book that came out in 2021 about dragons in Beijing. I have been interested in it since then, but I had not gotten my hands on a copy. This is just one of those used bookstore finds where like I never would have expected to find a copy of this book in the wild in a used bookstore. I fully expected to have to order this new online if I ever wanted to read it. Like the library doesn't have it, it's not going to be on the shelves of a local bookstore. But here it is. You know, miracles happen. So that's it. That's my entire book haul for the months of November 2023 until May 2024. Let me know if any of these books intrigue you. Let me know if you think there are any of the ones that I haven't read yet that I should really prioritize. Anyhow, I hope you're having a very nice day. That is all. Bye for now.